Welcome to another episode of Outrageous HR. Today, we're digging into why mid-year compliance check-ins matter so much. We've got several of our own experts joining us to talk about what HR should be doing this summer to stay on track with their compliance goals. We'll be covering Form I-9 compliance, compensation, AI in HR, and federal requirements. Let's start with one of the hottest topics in HR right now, immigration enforcement and Form I-9 compliance. So, what should employers be doing mid-year to check in on their I-9 processes and make sure they're prepared if ICE comes knocking? Here to answer that is our VP of I-9 Operations, Desiree Throckmorton. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Desiree. Would you mind giving us a reintroduction to who you are and what you do over at OutSolve?
Certainly. Here at OutSolve, I oversee our I-9 verification operations. While doing so, I support our consultants who deliver the high quality, client focused solution of all of the HR compliance elements, but mainly the I-9 verification clients. I also collaborate with our technical development team to turn in those compliance requirements into actual practical solutions in order to help clients reduce risk and drive operational efficiency.
Amazing. And I know that in a lot of my conversations, dare I say almost all of them, I-9s come up as a point of interest, a point of concern. So we would be honored today if you would walk us through what things employers need to be doing, kind of mid-year check-in to be prepared for audits and make sure that their I-9 process is accurate and flowing properly.
Yeah. I would say, number one, be nimble. Pretty much every day that I'm in the car and NPR is on, there's something about Department of Homeland Security and changes related in some fashion that employers have to be aware of. So I'd say keep your head on a swivel so that you are able to keep up with the changes that seem to be changing and then unchanging and then changing again. Outside of the head on a swivel, I would say conduct targeted internal audits. And I think that's probably the advice anybody would give in this space is take a look at what you've got in terms of the completion of I-9s in the past. Do you need to clean them up? What are your substantive violations that are found? All that is easier said than done. So to do so, I would suggest, grab a sample, pick a handful of employees and see if you can find their I-9s. First of all, I think a lot of times employers get stuck on, do we even have the I-9, and don't even have time to realize or figure out if those I-9s have errors. So I think kind of getting to know the past is also very important through that internal audit. But, part of that is also understanding your process. I think a lot of employers need to, at the mid-year, I think that's a pretty good time to do it, but probably continuously as well as making sure that there's a consistent process in place around the completion of I-9s. If it's decentralized, it's pretty easy to have things, go off the track. So it's important to make sure that, the various people involved understand the expectations. I know in my experience in doing this, sometimes you find people take liberties in how they process I-9s and who's doing what, and they're trying to do their best to partner, but ends up they make some mistakes that can be costly for an employer. So knowing your process is important, making sure timeliness is being achieved. So making sure Section 1 is done on or before the first day and Section 2 done within 3 days of hire. Again, I always say do it early. Don't wait for that 1 day, 3 day. Very importantly is your tracking of your folks who have temporary work authorization. You need to know who those people are. You need to know who they are. You need to know what's the impact of any of the TPS changes coming down from the current administration. This is basically a manual process for employers, but it's something that you need to be very aware of. And that's part of that first direction of head on a swivel, because that's the part that's changing a lot is the temporary work authorization statuses. And then last, strengthen your audit process for readiness. So let's say you received an ICE audit, would you be prepared? What would you do? What would be your process? So I think after, going through an audit, kind of getting to know your process, making sure your temporary work authorization folks are in order, give yourself a test, conduct that fire drill to see, do you have what you need in order to address an audit? You only have 3 days. That's not a lot of time.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Desiree, and giving us the things that should be top of mind as people are reviewing their processes, making sure that they are audit ready so we can prevent things from happening in the future while remedying the past. So that's all great information.
Thank you.
Now, with state pay transparency laws popping up all over the map and getting more attention than ever, making sure your compensation practices are equitable and compliant matters more than ever. Joining me to talk through that is Sarah Jane Hannon. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sarah Jane.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Would you mind reintroducing us to who you are and what you do at OutSolve?
Absolutely. My name is Sarah Jane Hannon. I'm a compensation analyst here at OutSolve. I specialize primarily in the external benchmarking projects as well as assisting in the internal systemic regression analyses.
Perfect. Well, I know that the compliance landscape is something that has really changed a lot, and compensation is one of those things that kind of has a spotlight on it. So we'd love if you could walk us through kind of the top 3 things that should be on everyone's mind as they're analyzing comp.
Absolutely.
So can you kick us off with why we should evaluate pay equity analytics?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing with running pay equity analyses is what we're trying to do here is to make sure that we are having fair pay across the board. We want to ensure that there aren't any unexpected or unfair pay disparities based off of race, gender, or ethnicity. We want to make sure that people in similar job titles are being paid what they should be. What we do with these analyses is we like to take all the factors that organizations think are important to pay, throw them into a model, and see what is really contributing to pay. Sometimes, we'll have variables like tenure or hire date that you could think are really important, but then end up not having as much of an impact as some other variables. So when we run these analyses, we take into account anything from department, job groups, job families, tenure, hire date, promotion date, anything that you think is important. We like to make sure that what you're using to pay people is what is actually contributing to pay. I think these analyses should be run every year because comp is always changing, right? You're always going to be hiring people, promoting people, and we want to make sure that as you're making those changes, your pay structures, your philosophies, and everything like that is really staying consistent across the board.
For sure. One of the things that you mentioned is a lot of internal look at your pay equity. Can you talk a little bit about the external look at pay?
So I think a big thing here is to make sure that you're conducting an external benchmarking analysis. What we like to do here is we'll take those job descriptions and we'll look at the market to see, we're not just looking at title. We want to make sure that we're paying people based off of what they're doing, not just what they're called. You'll have instances where if you've had an acquisition recently, you've got people coming in with new titles that you need to fit into your organization, but you're not entirely sure what to pay them based off of the market because maybe they're coming from a different location, from a different industry. You want to make sure that you're pulling data that's appropriate based off of the industry that you're in, the location, and the size of your organization. We want to make sure that as you're running these benchmarkings, that you're also creating consistent pay structures, right? You can use that market data to your advantage to create pay grades across the company and make sure that it's giving people visibility if you decide to be transparent to grow vertically. You want to be able to tell people, hey, this is where you're currently at, this is where you could be, and here's how to get there. That external look really gives insight as to where employees are within the market range themselves and any improvements that could be made in the organization over time.
So speaking about transparency, can you speak a little bit about that salary range transparency?
Yeah, so as I'm sure we've all seen, there's a lot of states that have recently come out with pay transparency laws. It's really important that if you're recruiting in any of those states, that you're constantly checking what those requirements are and how those laws are changing and when they go into effect. A lot of times, we'll make some changes here and there and then kind of let them be for a while. You could miss something really important that comes up. So we think it's really vital to constantly be checking any states that are coming out with those laws, with those requirements, making sure that we're staying on top of those because as they are changing, you could post something and then you're no longer in requirements 3 days later. So we want to make sure that we're staying on top of that. We're posting ranges when they're necessary. And if you just want to be transparent as an organization, we always like to promote that organizations should be relatively transparent. But when you're required to do so, make sure that you're following those requirements and anything like that that you could be posting to make your postings look better and attracting the best candidates possible.
Well said. Well, thank you for joining us today, Sarah Jane. You are always a wealth of knowledge, so we really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Next, let's talk AI. AI tools can streamline hiring and employee management, but they also introduce compliance risks we haven't really had to deal with before, especially around discrimination, bias, and data privacy. Our resident AI expert, Renee Arazi, is here to walk us through what you should be evaluating mid-year. Thank you so much for joining us today, Renee. Would you mind kicking us off with a little introduction of yourself and your role here at OutSolve?
Yes, thank you for having me. My name is Renee Arazi, and I am a Director of Operations and Team Lead at OutSolve, as well as the subject matter expert for HR AI compliance space. And I have about 10 years of experience in the HR compliance space, as well as several more years in talent acquisition for federal contractors.
Amazing. Well, thank you for lending your knowledge to us today. One of the things that's top of mind for HR professionals is AI and its usage in our processes. So, we have 3 elements we want to walk through today. Could you start us off with a little bit of information on the algorithmic bias testing?
Yes. So one local law to look out for is New York City Local Law 144. That would kind of be the highest standard, and doing a bias testing of your system if you're using AI, and certainly any vendor that you're using is typically doing a bias audit. So requesting that would be the first step. But moving forward, I would also say, as you're using this system, as you're having applicants apply, you need to be retesting. There could be some drift, things could change, so you need to continue to test the system.
Great. And then moving on, something that has also been a high level of conversation around is state compliance. So, is there any way for you to talk to us about state and local AI compliance usage?
Yes. So, and there's many different angles when it comes to AI. So there is the bias testing that we already kind of touched on, but then there's also um, notifications, letting applicants or employees know that you're using AI. So certainly check with your state. Employers should be checking to see if there's any specific laws for their state about notifications, about testing their system, and also the management of the data.
And speaking of data, one of the things that comes up pretty frequently in conversations with clients and with new prospects is data privacy. So, can you speak a little bit on how AI interacts with data privacy and security?
Yes. So, my recommendation to employers is to have vendors walk through how applicants flow through their system so that they can understand what is going on. And then also, um, how can they, what's the retention policy? What's the deletion policy? Some states have regulations around, let's say, an applicant requests for their information to be deleted. So the employers need to know that. And they also need to know, okay, how do I delete that information? If an applicant were to request that information, how do I provide that information to those applicants? So certainly also looking at different roles, their access level to the systems would be another area as far as data security that I would recommend looking into.
All right. Well, I know that I learned something today. So, thank you so much, Renee, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Last but not least, let's talk federal contractor requirements. Federal contractors are juggling a lot of competing interests these days, balancing strict reporting requirements with proactive outreach efforts, and recent regulatory updates have only made things more complex. Paul McTaggart is here to break down what's changed. Hey, Paul.
Hi, Catherine.
Thank you for joining us today. Would you mind kicking us off with a little introduction about who you are and what you do over here at OutSolve?
My name is Paul McTaggart. I'm one of your dedicated consultants here at OutSolve. And, we support organizations of all sizes, from your mom and pop 50 employee shops to organizations that have well over 100,000 employees. And, regardless of the size, we really see that a lot of them share the same compliance challenges. Uh, Today, we're going to really walk you through some of the best practices to help you stay on track and ahead of the curve. So, here are the top 3 things that we want you guys to evaluate mid-year. Number 1 is going to be your AAP data. So make sure that you are actively collecting and maintaining accurate data. Ask yourselves this: are we actually using the approved forms for solicitation of disability status, Form CC 305? Are we providing opportunities both pre and post offer to voluntarily self ID? Are we actually providing applicants and employees the descriptions of the protected veteran categories? That's going to be really important for them to help, understand whether or not they identify that way. So after that, we also want to make sure that you're evaluating their AAP data. So are we documenting our good faith outreach efforts? Do we know whether or not we're meeting our protected veterans hiring benchmarks? Do we know, are we tracking progress towards individuals with disabilities utilization goal? This is where a lot of the organizations subject to these requirements are falling short. It's not in their intent, but it's really in the documentation and follow through of those efforts. Number 2, we're going to talk about the required reporting and just being ready for those reports. So we want you all to be especially ready for EO1 and that's 4212 deadlines. So what that means is you have to be checking your systems. Is your data complete on the self ID? Do we have the correct job categories assigned to our employees? Do we actually have accurate work locations tied to each of those employees? That's going to be crucial for maintaining the accurate reporting. We also want you to confirm that the employee counts are more or less consistent with what you would expect from our AAP data. We want to ensure that the proper EIN, NICs, and UEI are assigned properly. And here's where the risk comes in, is that even small errors in these required reportings can create major compliance risk down the road, whether we're bidding for contracts or whether we're audited. Having the proper EIN, NICs, employee counts, and location addresses assigned can really save you a lot of trouble in the future. Finally, let's move on to number 3, labor law posters. And I know this seems easy, but there's something we don't want you guys to overlook. Don't overlook something simple because it's often missed. There are a lot of changes that happen with the labor law posters, especially due to minimum wage and changes in the federal contracting space. So we need to ensure that 1, our posters are displayed conspicuously. 2, that they actually reflect the updated requirements. So current thresholds include $13.65 for non-tipped employees who are subject or covered under federal contracts, and $9.55 for tipped employees. Warning, this isn't just technical. This is literally a visible compliance risk at your organization. It's in the break room. Hopefully they're available for everybody who works remotely too, but it is literally a visible risk. If your employees see that we have outdated posters, why not call on you? I might. We have updated posters here, but you never know. Look, at the end of the day, guys, compliance isn't just about meeting the requirements. It's about making them manageable. So what we want you to do is just please continue to focus on the AAP data, being ready for the mandatory reporting, and make sure our poster compliance is in place. We really want to help everyone move from being reactive to being proactive. And that's exactly where we want all of our partners to be.
Well, thank you for engaging with us today, Paul.
Hey, always happy to be a part.
That wraps up what you should be doing for your mid-year HR checkup. Whether it's I-9 compliance, pay equity, AI risk, or federal contractor requirements, the message today was the same. Don't wait until year end to catch what's slipping through the cracks today. The good news is this: OutSolve can help with everything we've covered, and then some. Connect with an OutSolve compliance expert to get a read on where you stand. And if you want to keep the conversation going, join us in HR Gumbo City, our Slack community built specifically for HR professionals. It's a great place to ask other HR professionals questions or get guidance and advice, and members get exclusive first access to checklists, guides, and research reports. Visit outsolve.com/HRG-city to join today. Thanks to all of our experts for breaking it all down, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on Outrageous HR.